Hello. Today in Austin, Texas, it's going to be 94 degrees. But up in the Antarctic, at the South Pole, it's 5.5 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's the highest that it's going to get. What is it that makes men want to go into the unknown? Is it the love of adventure? Or is it the desire for more knowledge about the unknown spaces that we still haven't occupied on Earth? Or is it just little voices that come in the night and say, let's do something, let's go someplace and have an adventure? And that's what we're going to do today. We're going on an adventure into the cold, iciest climate in the world. There was a man named Ernest Shackelton. He was an explorer. And in March of 1907, he decided that he wanted to go and explore the South Pole one more time. Scott had tried to get to the South Pole, and young Mr. Shackelton was on his first expedition. However, he didn't get to the South Pole at that time. So now he is going to start and get a group of men together and a ship and try to do it one more time. How do you suppose somebody goes around to get a big company of men to do this thing? Well, first he has to finance it. People are very tight with their money when you say you're an explorer. They don't think you'll ever come back alive. But Mr. Shackelton was determined, and he thought he knew what he was going to do. So he went to the government of Great Britain. King Edward VII was on the throne, but his parliament and all that said, oh, no, no, no to Mr. Shackelton. They weren't going to give him any money for something so bizarre as going off into the South Pole. So he appealed to other countries like Australia. Australia loved adventurers, and it said yes immediately. And also New Zealand. New Zealand is down at the end of the Arctic Circle. Their weather depends on how severe it's going to be up in the South Pole area and all on the Ross Sea and the Weddell Sea. And so is New Zealand and Australia. So he appealed to them for funds so he could get some men together, meteorologists, and people that were interested in the scientific part of his exploration. And so we have the beginning of the journey to the South Pole. Then we have to have a ship. So Mr. Shackelton looked at a beautiful ship. It was not a new ship, but it was certainly well provided to go into the ice, but it was too expensive. So he settled on a smaller ship called the Nimrod. The Nimrod was an old ship, but it was a sturdy ship, and it was one that could withstand the ice for a little while. Not to stay up there at the South Pole when it started freezing over, but it could get them there. So when he got his ship and he put it in dry dock immediately, and they started waxing all the seams and every bit of the deck and the masts and the sails were replaced with new materials, and he had himself a sturdy ship. And then he got a commander for the ship, a man named Matheson. Well, there we have it. Now we have to get a crew. Well, about 600 men showed up. And out of those 600 men, Mr. Shackelton had to whittle it down to people that were going to really work. I've mentioned the mineralogist because he has to go and probe the ice and see if there's any minerals up there, and they're going to study the rock formation and the ice formation. And they're going to probe beneath the surface of the ice. And then we have to have a meteorologist, one that can study the stars. He will be the compass. He will watch where they're going and how they're going to get there, north to south and east to west, and measure the wind velocity. Okay? Okay, well, Mr. Shackelton had heard that animals are a nuisance on a voyage or on any kind of a trip such as he was going to take, but he'd also heard that ponies can pull the sledges. So he was going to order 16 Manchurian ponies, those that were used to living in the rough climate. And sure enough, he sent a man to Mongolia to look into buying some ponies. The ponies were not trained, so he had his meteorologist and a biologist, and now he needed a veterinarian. So all these men that he was going to choose out of these others that had showed up at the dock, ready to sign on his little ship, he got a veterinarian. Now, they had to have ponies and dogs to haul the sledges. These haul 650 pounds, the larger ones. He also had to order from scratch. He had nothing. So he had to put in orders for these to be made. And hopefully he would get them made out of a light material so that it didn't take up the weight. The weight was very important. The only thing that was going to really weigh a lot were the 18 tons of coal. Yes, I said coal. Coal would not only be advantage for a fuel for the ship, because when the sails weren't used, you had to have the furnaces. So we took all the coal with us. We also had to have coal for a wood-burning stove for the chef, the cook, to cook on. So now we have to have not only the veterinarian, the meteorologist, the mineralogist, but a cook. So we hired a cook. He had a stove 4 feet wide with an oven and, of course, a grill and a hot plate and a smokestack. The stove would also go for heating their living quarters when they get up to the Antarctic in what they were going to call a hut, H-U-T, hut. So then we had to have men that would stoke the coal for the ship. And that took about 4 men. And so he gradually got his little crew together, and the 16 ponies and the 9 dogs to pull the sledge. Now we have to have provisions. He had heard about scurvy. Scurvy is a disease that comes from food that is not packed properly. It has to feed the men not only a beef, but they call it a jerky, like we have jerky in Texas. We dry our beef. So this would be some dried beef, and he would have dried fruit, along with cheese, powdered milk, tea. Said nothing about coffee, but tea to the English, which are all on this ship, was very important, and some tobacco. So we're getting together. He ordered his provisions made specially for this trip. He didn't go to just any old grocery store around the corner. He went to a very reliable food company in London, England, and they were responsible for packaging and providing the provisions, the flour, the sugar, pounds and pounds of it. But every now the man who, there was another man that was important besides the veterinarian and the cook, was the provision. He was called the provider, and he measured almost ounce for ounce how much food was to be taken and how they were going to ration it out. He was going to watch that nobody got more than the other person. There was also chocolate, cocoa is a very good nutritious element. And as I've mentioned before, cheese. All Englishmen love cheese. So they were packaging cheese and flour and milk and all the staples and Quaker oats, oats for breakfast. Now, so we have a pretty good start, don't we? And the little ship is already at the dock, and we have to go to the checking off place will be New Zealand. The ponies must each have a stall for itself. Each pony is separated from the other one, all on board the little Nimrod. Every dog had to have a kennel to itself so they wouldn't fight and bother each other. So we had the little ship built for the stalls of the little